Good morning, Europe. It's Thursday, the 7th of April. A very warm welcome to the programme. Let's begin by looking at our top stories.
The White House targets the Russian president's two daughters and his foreign minister's wife and daughter, as well as banks, in the latest sanctions against Vladimir Putin. How far the European Union are willing to go and when are still top of the agenda in Strasbourg, with support to go much further after the atrocities seen this week, with debates on gas and oil sanctions to continue. Meanwhile, Russia's inflation rate has increased by 16.7% in a week, after the earlier penalties are now having an effect on the country. The harrowing images of death and destruction seen in the Ukrainian city of Bucha have triggered new sanctions from Europe and the US in a fresh attempt to cripple Vladimir Putin's economy and war effort. Among White House targets are the Russian president's two daughters and the wife and daughter of Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov.
We've seen a pattern over time of President Putin and Russian oligarchs stash assets and resources in the bank accounts and of their family members. And so this was an effort to get at those assets, and that's why these individuals were sanctioned.
Russia's largest and state-run lender, Sberbank, and the country's number one private lender, Alfa Bank, are also part of the new raft of sanctions. However, the efficacy of these moves is questioned by some.
Frankly, the more meaningful response has been the Stinger missiles. They've been the drones. It's been the Javelin anti-tank missiles. It's been even tanks now coming from the Czech Republic. The economic sanctions continue to escalate every day. From the United States and from Europe and from other wealthy countries too. That's causing a lot of damage to the Russian economy, but it's not changing Russian behavior one iota.
Even so, diplomats in Brussels are considering EU sanctions proposed by the European Commission, including banning Russian coal imports as part of a wider package of measures that would further restrict trade with its eastern neighbour. The sanctions, which also include a ban on Russian ships docking at EU ports, are expected to be finalised on Thursday after last-minute wrangling on details, such as a coal phase-out.
Well, EU sanctions against Russia, how far the EU is willing to go and when, still very much top of the agenda here in Strasbourg amongst, in particular, European Parliament group leaders. There is, in general, a resounding support for the EU to go much further, to sanction oil, to sanction gas, even from countries like Germany and Austria, who had been holding out on this issue, but see that given the war crimes we've witnessed in Bucha over the past few days, that there's no option. We heard from Charles Michel, President of the European Council, who also said that gas and oil sanctions would happen sooner or later. Meanwhile, back in Brussels, EU ambassadors are discussing the sanctions announced on Tuesday. There had been hope that there would be an agreement on this yesterday. It's gone back to the ambassadors today, but there probably will be consensus. But again, the oil and gas sanctions still outstanding. What I have heard is that one country is the strongest holdout, Hungary, which said oil and gas sanctions is a red line for them. Shona Murray, Strasbourg.
Annual inflation in Russia accelerated to 16.7% in a week. Analysts predict that Russia's economy could shrink from 10 to 15% this year. And on Wednesday, President Putin's spokesman Dmitry Peskov for the first time admitted a possibility of a default on international debt. Mr. Peskov said, in theory, a default situation could be created, but it would be a purely artificial one. So he stressed that there were no grounds for a real default. Russia's state TV focused on the fact that the EU could not agree on banning Russia's coal and concluded that Ukraine was dividing Europe. Meanwhile, Russia's papers wrote about new US sanctions, and the Kommersant quoted Joe Biden, who said that just in 1 year, sanctions are likely to wipe out the last 15 years of Russia's economic gains. Galina Polonskaya, Euronews from Paris.
It's more than a month since the start of the war, days after Ukrainian troops regained control of many areas previously occupied by Russian forces, and a pattern of destruction and killing of civilians is reportedly emerging. Just northwest of Kyiv lies the village of Andriivka, which had been occupied for weeks by Russian troops. Russian military are now said to be headed towards eastern Ukraine. Western experts say it could take up to a week for them to be in position to begin what the Kremlin insists is the liberation of the Donbass area. Ukrainian authorities are urging residents in the east of the country to leave in the face of the impending Russian offensive, in particular the people in the Donetsk and Luhansk regions. In his latest television address, President Volodymyr Zelensky vowed to fight on until Russia begins to seek peace seriously. Elsewhere, and a local official from Hostomel says that more than 400 people are believed missing. The town with its airport bore the brunt of Russian advances on Ukraine's capital, Kiev, along with Bucha and Irpin. But there has been a moment of relief for about 1,000 refugees after the Red Cross managed to help lead to safety a convoy from the besieged port city of Mariupol.
Following the atrocities in the Ukrainian town of Bucha over the weekend, NATO foreign ministers and its allies met on Wednesday to discuss further military support for the embattled country. Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg expressed his concern at what he says is Putin's intention to move forces from the north of Ukraine to the east, where a major offensive is expected.
We have to be realistic and realize that this may last for a long time, for many months, for even years. And that's the reason why we need also to be prepared for long haul, both when it comes to supporting Ukraine, sustaining sanctions, and strengthening our defenses.
The meeting will continue on Thursday, where the Ukrainian foreign minister will join ministers by video call. He's expected to ask for more military supplies, including anti-aircraft equipment. But as the war in Ukraine deepens and more assistance is needed, how far is Europe willing to go, and what could the continent end up eventually looking like?
I think a new Cold War is a reasonable prediction for how Europe will look. There will be a zero-sum nature to the conflict, and it will be long-lasting as the Cold War was. Everything will be defined now in terms of this competition between Europe, with the transatlantic alliance, and Russia, and that will affect the security certainly of Georgia and the North Caucasus, of Moldova, and no doubt the security of Ukraine as well. And it is possible, of course, that Russia could lose this war outright, in which case you wouldn't see a Cold War, you would see a weaker Russia, but one certainly with grievances and anger toward Europe that would be an important factor in the European future. But a Cold War, I think, is the best prediction.
Ministers will also discuss what more can be done to help its partners like Georgia and Bosnia and Herzegovina that are vulnerable to Russian threats. Christopher Pidgeons, Euronews, Brussels.
Chelsea's hold on the Champions League hangs in the balance after Karim Benzema's hat-trick put Real Madrid in a strong position going into their second leg quarter-final game. The Spanish side won 3-1. Chelsea's Kai Havertz's header gave the English side hope before the break, but after the teams returned, the dominating Benzema scored 2 more. In Villarreal, it was a good night for the hosts. Their match against Bayern Munich finished 1-0, with Dutchman Arnaud Danjuma scoring the crucial goal. The German champions gave a lacklustre performance and were ultimately kept quiet by a strong Villarreal defence. But there's still all to play for in the big second leg match next Tuesday in Munich.
You're watching Good Morning Europe. Time for us to take a break. We'll be back in a few moments.